I'm Kavin, and I enjoy doing magic tricks in my free time.
That's lovely, and probably a very interesting hobby considering the more intense and serious courses you're pursuing at UCLA. So, guys, this is Kavin Shah. He's a sophomore at the University of California, Los Angeles. So, UCLA, as everyone knows it. He's majoring in economics and mathematics. Today, we'll be hearing more from him about the choices he's made, the lessons he's learned along the way, as well as some advice and insights he'll be sharing to young high school students like yourself listening to the podcast as you prepare for this super exciting next phase of your life, roller coaster of a ride that we call as university. So, welcome to University Unraveled. I'm your host, Arya Darod. I currently study at Minerva University. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
My pleasure, and I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Lovely. I'm excited as well. So, I want to start with a very direct question. UCLA is a huge school. You've got an incoming class of about 6,000, 7,000 kids every year. It's an absolutely huge institution, and I'm sure your classes are big as well. Do you view the university size as a net pro or a net con to your overall experience?
I definitely feel that there are a lot of pros and cons to having a super big class size, and I definitely do think there are more pros than cons in the situation. So one of the major pros of having such a large incoming freshman class is that you get to meet people from all across the world with all different types of unique experiences, and they all come from backgrounds that are very, very diverse and different from you. Personally, for me in high school, I mainly interacted with people who are very similar from me, whether that be like similar race, similar socioeconomic background, like similar values, similar interests and hobbies. So coming to UCLA is when you definitely expand your bubble that you've sort of been in for a majority of your life. And that definitely is a pro to have a better global view on the world. And as you advance later into your professional career, it's always beneficial to be able to connect and work with different types of people from all over the world to help you become more successful as well. The only con that I can think of having such a large class size is that it's very hard to find your own place within that university sometimes. And for simple things such as like class registration, it's extremely difficult because you're competing with thousands of students for the same class. And for example, another example that I can think of is when you're eating at a dining hall, there's long lines to get food because there's so many kids and just a limited amount of space as well. So those are just some of the cons where you have to share like limited resources with a lot of people.
I'm curious, and this is just one of my apprehensions for going to a bigger school with bigger classes, is how do you get, is there any way to get more personalized attention from a professor specifically and to like stand out so that they know Kevin as a person versus Kevin as just one student among hundreds who sits in their classroom?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few things that you can do to help yourself fit in, like find your place and help people see you as well. For your professors specifically, emailing them, coming to them after class, and then asking those extra questions during their office hours is definitely just obviously a great way for them to recognize you and put a name to your face. Because honestly, some professors have thousands of students, and there's some of the classes that I've taken, I bet you the professor doesn't even know my name or doesn't even know like I'm a student, like I was a student of theirs. So that's definitely something that would be very helpful for certain professors that you want to have like a strong connection with, is going to those times where there is a smaller group setting, because then they're more likely to remember your name as well. Another thing you can do for yourself to help you find your place within like such a large community is also finding all these joining different clubs and finding all these smaller communities of people with similar interests as you. That could be as simple as joining, like, for example, like UCLA is like an Indian Student Association where they have a bunch of Bollywood events, and they'll have like Garba, they'll have Diwali celebrations and all that. There's also clubs for like professional development if you're like interested in like computer science or you're interested in math. There's so many different clubs for all these sub interests. And there's even such obscure clubs that we have, such as like a lettuce eating club where they just meet every week and they just eat like a head of lettuce. So finding these like smaller communities within the large community is super helpful for you to be able to find your place and fit in amongst thousands of people.
And I'm sure that just statistically, with so many students, there is someone who shares a niche interest like you. So, like, for example, in your case, I'm sure you've found a few folks who are into magic tricks, and that's just something you connect over. So
Mhm.
that's definitely a big pro, I think, of going to such a big school. Um, so you're majoring in economics and mathematics, which is an intense but a lovely combination. I think they tie very well together. So I'm just wondering, I know it's a long way away,
Yeah.
but what do you see yourself doing with this combination post graduation?
Yeah, like you said, there's definitely still like a long way for me to go into my professional life, and I'm still not 100% sure about what I want to do. And a big part of that is giving myself the flexibility. And I feel like this major does give me a lot of flexibility in terms of what I want to advance into the future. And additionally, if I do want to pursue graduate school as well in the future, this is a perfect major for me that like combines all my interests and also keeps the doors wide open. One particular career that I'm super interested in looking into is becoming an actuary. And for those of you that don't know, an actuary is just someone who analyzes risk, typically for insurance companies. Like for example, like how much should they charge their premiums for, and other basic risk analysis like that. So it's a very math heavy career, but also understanding finance in the broader economic world is super important, just for any career in general. And I'm also over the summer right now, I'm also just taking a class on personal taxes and how to file your taxes, because that's definitely a very underrated skill that everyone will have to go through. So just sort of understanding the whole world, how it works economically, and then getting that mathematical knowledge, I believe will give me a lot of flexibility in terms of what I want to do later in my career.
Just curious. I also didn't know the definition of an actuary, but I'm glad you
Yeah.
sort of laid it out for everyone. Just curious why you chose through economics and math versus just studying finance. And the way I'm seeing it is finance is also a good path which could potentially lead to the career you're looking for. But is there a reason you chose a different combination?
Yeah, so UCLA doesn't actually have like a finance major for undergraduate students. In fact, we do actually have a major called financial actuarial mathematics, which is like specifically designed for people who want to become an actuary. But the problem with that major is that it is very limited, and it's like you have to become an actuary with that major, and no one else outside of that field will really value that degree as much. So mathematics and economics gives me like the most flexibility, and it allows me to go into that path of becoming an actuary, while also giving me the path if I want to go into like wealth management, if I want to do consulting or other of those other careers like related to finance, but also with a heavy like math focus as well. So we don't actually have like an undergraduate business school, so that's why I chose math and yeah.
That's interesting. That's good to know. And I'm glad you're keeping options open. I'm sure that
Yeah,
having that specific major sort of ties you down. But at this
yeah,
stage, for all you know, every year you have a different idea of what you want to do after
exactly,
graduation,
yeah,
which is the case with me. There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, yeah,
Curious about, so I visited LA, beautiful city. I had a few friends at USC, so I did get a chance to go to their campus, it's a beautiful campus in the heart of the city. I
yeah.
personally heard that UCLA was slightly more detached from downtown LA. I'm just curious how you find the location of the campus. One, in terms of safety. Two, in terms of just access to downtown LA.
Yeah, so in addressing like the first part of the question in terms of safety, I definitely do feel like UCLA is a lot more safer than USC and a lot of other colleges in terms of their downtown area. The downtown area is called Westwood, which is like the neighboring city around UCLA. And that city is definitely very safe at downtown. There's obviously still like the normal amount of homeless people you would expect. But as long as you're within a big group of people and you're not walking alone super late at night, it's usually a very safe area, which is something that's great because anytime we want to go to the downtown area, either just to walk around and just enjoy the views of people, or if we want to go eat out somewhere, it's perfectly safe to do so. And there hasn't been any situation so far where I've been a lot more cautious of like my surroundings as well. And in terms of my access to downtown LA, it's definitely very far from like the main part of LA. It's near Beverly Hills, like the west side of LA, and then USC that you probably visited is on the east side of LA. So that's definitely closer to all of, like the more tourist attractions and the typical image that people have of Los Angeles. The problem with LA, as you might have experienced, is that there's immense amounts of traffic every single place that you go. And for example, a simple 10-mile drive can take you over an hour, where in other places it would just take you like a little 20 to 30 minutes. So it definitely is very far, and we're used to like it taking a while to get to everywhere we reach, but it's definitely not in like the true heart of LA like USC is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think LA reminds me of Mumbai, so I felt at
Yeah,
home with the
yeah,
topic. But it's good to know that the campus is in, and I'm sure I was also told this by a USC friend that the campus is
yeah.
definitely in a safer location. And also because it's a bit to the side, you've got a chance to have a much bigger and a very, very beautiful campus, I've heard. So I actually
Yeah.
regret not coming down and visiting. Um, what's your favorite hangout spot in the whole city?
Definitely going to the beach a lot because LA is full of different beaches. So far, I just finished my first year at UCLA. I've been to 6 different beaches all across the LA. Some of them are super little, and then the other ones are like the main popular beaches like Santa Monica, and then there's like Venice Beach, and there's also Dockweiler Beach, which is right next to the LAX airport. So definitely going to the beach is just a perfect place to be because the weather's perfect. It's usually just around the 70s there. And it's just a super calm place. Like I've even gone to the beach and just studied there one day because it's a different environment when you're outside when the weather's perfect. And there's so much to do, especially with your friends. Like we went in the night one day at like 10 or 11 o'clock in the night and we just started a bonfire there. So I definitely feel like the beach is like the go-to hangout spot for us where we can like explore different beaches all across the coast of LA while also still having a lot of flexibility in terms of what we do there as well.
Yeah, beautiful beaches. Beautiful beaches. Can't disagree.
Yeah.
Would love to rewind a little. So this is more than a year ago for you, but I just want to walk through your high school days and what were some of the different activities and projects and extracurriculars you actually involve yourself in. Can be related or can be even unrelated to the major you're currently pursuing, but just generally curious how you crafted yourself as a strong and attractive applicant for UCLA, which I'm sure is a super competitive school.
Yeah. So the main extracurricular that I had in high school was I started my own financial literacy nonprofit called Project Venture. And through this organization, we hosted workshops, we posted infographics on Instagram, and we had our annual investment hackathon. And in this hackathon, we would bring in company sponsors and guest speakers from companies like Ernst and Young and Bank of America as well. So these companies provided us with like a huge reputation and they gave us like thousands of dollars in sponsorships as well. And we were able to get over 50 teams to compete in all of our hackathons. So that was definitely like a super big extracurricular I was involved in, and it showed my leadership because I was managing a team of over 15 people that all worked under me, and it also showed my like dedication to finance, and it suited perfectly right within to my major that I applied for as well. In terms of how I crafted myself as a person overall during the whole college application process, I definitely focused on my essays and extracurriculars and how I word them very nicely to show exactly what I did throughout my 4 years. So for the University of California application, they give you a total of 20 different spots that you can put different extracurricular activities that you have done all throughout your high school years. And for me, like most people, they don't have 20. I only had 15 or so, but they only give you like 75 words that you can describe like what you did over the course of 4 years. So it's super important to take the time and find the way to most efficiently describe your entire 4 years of worth of experience into just 75 words, which definitely like I definitely appreciated that I took that effort and try to quantify all of my achievements and try to use strong vocabulary words as well instead of like just saying I did something like I directed it, I led it, or something like that. That's a lot more stronger than just saying like I did this, this, and this. In terms of my essays, um, I definitely try to craft myself as someone who is super interested in the whole business and mathematics world. And I did this by tying all of my essay topics back to my career interests and how that particular experience that I had tied into my future career and how that'll help me to become a successful college student. Like I had some completely unrelated essays to business and math, such as one about like overall like growing up Indian as a Jain person. And then another one was just literally about like magic tricks. And then I was able to find a way to connect all those experiences back into how this will help me develop as a person. So that definitely showed a larger impact than like this is just something that I do. And it gave my essays a lot more relevance.
Would love to. I mean, you've already given two big pieces
Yeah,
of advice, which I completely agree with. One, strong action verbs rather than did is
yeah,
like directed, led, managed,
yeah,
co-founded, etc. Two, quantifying impact. But would love to dive a little deeper here. On the Common App, there's very limited number of characters to
yeah,
define extracurriculars. Some extracurriculars have been something you've been doing for years, nearly all
yeah,
your life.
yeah,
Would share and dive a little deeper and say more about how do you fit that entire long story, which could take up multiple pages on a Word doc,
yeah, yeah.
to just limited characters? Like, what should the focus be upon?
Yeah. So just a general tip about formatting your extracurriculars is when you're writing your sentences, you don't write like incomplete sentences because that does waste a lot of filler words when you just use like I did this and I did that. Instead, just you start off with the verb, the action verb directly at the very start, and then you quantify it, whatever you did, and then you just like you keep it as short as possible. Like don't worry about being super grammatically correct, making sure all your punctuation is right, you have proper sentence structure. Like at the end of the day, they just want to see you want to be able to put the max amount of information that you can within those short amount of characters. And another thing that you want to focus on is more, you want to try to quantify whatever you can whenever possible. So if you did something that was impressive, but you can't really quantify it, it might not be the best, might not be the best sort of task that you want to include when describing this overall extracurricular. You also want to focus more on like the impact you had rather than like the specific things that you did, because they care more about like what that you got out of it rather than what you actually did to get out of it, if that makes sense. So definitely focusing on the overall impact and results, such as like if you like, for example, like how I hosted investment hackathons throughout high school, I would sort of tell like what that led from it. Like over 90% of people said that they were more motivated to take control of their finances. Or we had over 50 different teams that competed. Instead of saying like hosted investment hackathon, you talk about like hosted event that led to so and so. Like that's like a stronger way to describe your experiences instead of just like saying what you did. You want to, once again, like I said before, like to reiterate, it's just saying what let you got like let out of it.
I feel like a good question to ask is just, so what? So rather than
Yeah,
getting stuck in the tiny details of I did this.
mm-hmm.
For example, in my application, I talked about a novel I wrote. So rather than getting stuck in the plot of the novel, was just, so what? How
Yeah,
did that help me grow? How did that help me develop as a person? What did it teach me? Plus
mm-hmm.
impact in terms of
Yeah,
readership and sales. I think impact can also be quantitative. I think qualitative impact is also important for something like the novel I wrote. If
yeah,
it just inspired other kids to write their own novels, even if that's just
mm-hmm.
4 or 5 kids, I think that's still a valuable impact to talk about from a qualitative point of view. Um,
Yes,
but beautiful deep dive. If someone's applying to a university where they have the option of applying undecided, and they feel like they're still wavering between a couple different majors, do you think it's generally a good idea to just apply undecided, take first year courses, and then finalize the major? Like in my case, we have to finalize the
yeah.
major for second year. How do you feel about the undecided option?
So I'm going to address this question in two different parts. In terms of your chances of getting into the college if you apply undeclared, it definitely does depend on your extracurriculars and your interests. So if all your extracurriculars and interests are catered to one specific major or they have a general focus, you're going to have a higher chance of getting into that college if you apply for that specific major because it shows demonstrated interest and experience already in that field. Me personally, I would not recommend applying for undeclared. And I would just pick a path, even if you're not sure about it, because if you apply undeclared, you won't get as much of an opportunity to really try something. Whereas if you do apply to something, and even if you're not sure about it, at least you'll get the exposure to it because you'll be automatically just enroll in classes related to that major. So that way you will get exposed to that major, and then from there you can completely decide if you want to switch or not. But I would just definitely recommend choosing a path, even if you're not sure about it, committing to it. And then if it changes, it changes. Just have that open mindset. But it's definitely like better than just like not knowing anything to do. And then you're kind of just like in the middle ground where you're trying to figure out what you want to do, but you also don't know.
In your case specifically, so you applied for economics and math course. Throughout your first year, maybe it's too late now, but throughout your first year, if you had to hypothetically switch to a completely random, different major. So if, let's say, you found yourself interested in computer science or philosophy or literature, one, would you have been able to? And two, any idea, can you give us an idea of just the general process of just making that switch?
All right, yeah. So UCLA works and has a very flexible policy for switching majors compared to most other colleges. I know, for example, like University of California, Berkeley is a lot more strict with changing the majors because they take in a lot more students. So they don't have as much room in all of their different departments to accommodate for the changes. However, UCLA takes like 2 or 3K less people per year. So once you are admitted, it's definitely a lot easier to change majors. The only majors that are a little bit harder to switch into are if you're going from the general college to the College of Engineering, then it is a little bit more of a formal process. But in general, I would be able to make the switch right now to like pretty much any other major I wanted to, as long as I follow like certain guidelines that they have. So it's definitely very possible and very doable. However, I do know that a lot of other colleges are not as flexible with this. And it's definitely important to look at like previous students' experiences trying to switch majors. And for me personally, I don't think I would be switching majors. I never considered it at any point. But if I did want to, the option was definitely.
And hypothetically, if you had to switch, you can switch as late as your first year summer, or are you too late at this point?
You can switch usually after your second year summer.
Oh, wow.
Because you can take a little bit longer than 4 years at most universities if you need it to finish your bachelor's degree. And after third year is when you start taking like the upper division, the higher level classes for that specific major. So as long as you switch before then, you'll have the time and ability to complete all the general requirements that you need for the major. And then from there, you can start specializing and taking all like the specific classes for that major. So you do definitely have a little bit of time. But once again, if you like circling back to the whole topic of applying as undeclared, if you do apply as undeclared, then you're kind of losing on some time to do the exploration as well. So it's better to engage in that process as soon as you can of exploring your major and your career interests. So that way, if you do feel like you want to make the change, you can do it as fast as you can, because obviously the faster that you change your major and have that committed path, the easier it is for you in terms of like your course load later on, and also just a general outlook that you can have on the rest of your college
life. Lovely. I love the deep dive, and I mean, this is specific to UCLA. I'm sure different schools have different policies, but I'm glad that we just went on this deep dive. Just something I was personally curious about. Would love to make a switch and fast forward a little bit now, and we're going to talk a little bit about your entire first year at UCLA. I'm sure there were a lot of changes. I'm sure there were a lot of highs and lows. First year is an absolute roller coaster. I want to start with something that's very basic, but I think not like taken for granted. A lot of us are used to just, unless we've stayed in a hostel, a lot of us are used to staying at home, having a room to ourselves. We come to college and there's much less privacy just because you're staying in a dorm with roommates almost all the time. So just want to gently talk about how that experience was for you, and anything you've learned or realized along this first year journey.
All right, yeah. So I would have to say I'm definitely very grateful for my dorm experience my first year, and I acknowledge that I had a very good experience compared to most other people that I know. Both of my roommates were extremely easygoing, and they were willing to compromise, and there was never like a single point throughout the year where we had a disagreement with each other or that we were getting frustrated with one another. And I think the biggest key when living with other people, especially in college dorms, is to just always be willing to compromise, and always just making sure that you're aware that you're sharing the space with other people, and like whatever you do, like your mess also affects them indirectly. Like at the end of the day, yes, everyone does have like their own desk and their own bed, but if you're keeping like the room really messy and you're keeping your desk super messy with things overflowing all across the room, it does affect your roommates as well. So just keeping in mind that whatever your actions in the room and like how you take care of your room as well affects other people, definitely like gave me the motivation to keep my desk and my bed and my whole like room in general relatively clean. So that way my roommates will also reciprocate that action as well. And we can have like a clean living space where everyone feels comfortable. Additionally, compared to like my room that I'm currently in at home, I definitely feel like I spend a lot less time in my college like dorm than you would in your home room, because at college you're usually out and about during the day, going to clubs, eating at the dining hall, attending classes, doing your extracurricular activities, spending time with your friends in the lounge. So usually it ends up being that you're in the dorm for like mainly in the morning and then towards the night when you're getting ready to sleep. And just another general helpful tip that we noticed within my roommate group this year was we got LED lights for our room. And the great thing about this is usually in college people will sleep at different times. Like one person might sleep at 12, one person might sleep at 1, one person might sleep at 2. So what we did is we would just turn on the LED lights on like a super dark setting, and that would give us like the perfect amount of privacy if someone's trying to sleep. That way there's not just like a full light on them, but also gives people the amount of light they need if they're doing work. And it's also super important to talk with your future roommates about just general living lifestyles before you do commit to them as a roommate, to make sure it matches up. For example, if one roommate likes the room super warm during the nighttime, but the other one really puts on a lot of AC, then it's like, what are you going to do when you guys are sleeping in the same room in the same night every single day? And it's like, that can lead to people like losing sleep. And then from there gets other problems where you start disagreeing with each other more and more. So this experience has definitely overall just taught me to be a lot more compromising and a lot more understanding and a lot more responsible, knowing that you're sharing this space with other people, and your actions and how you act in general does affect that as well.
I think it's a worthwhile experience to have. Couple of things. First, would like to say that the LED lights are a good solution. I know that if me and you were roommates, I go to bed by 10. I know you go to bed couple hours after that. So this would have been a good solution. Otherwise, it would have been madness. But I think two more things I'll add is, one, I think it's nice to spend as much time outside the room as possible, because honestly, it can be slightly depressing and lonely to just also be in the room all day. And also, I think you've got a beautiful campus outside. Create that division between the room just being for sleep and rest, and then your work can be outside in the library or under a beautiful sunny day under a tree. And number two, I think, is with roommates, I think it's a feedback loop which can go in either direction. In your case, it feels like the direction has been positive. So when your roommate sees that you're putting an effort to keep the room clean, they also feel responsible to keep the room clean themselves. And that goes in a positive direction where you both feel indebted to sort of keep the room clean and the room becomes clean. Versus there are cases where one person is keeping the room messy, the other person is why they're trying to keep it clean, and then the room just becomes messy. So I think decide which direction you want to go in, and it's going to be a snowballing loop either way. But I'm glad we touched upon this. I think this is something too few students think about before college. But I think even filling up that roommate form is so important, indicating those preferences so you get the right person. So I'm glad we dived into this. Another aspect I want to touch upon, which maybe is also not thought about as much, is university classes will be significantly different from high school classes. In my case, two big differences. One, length. A lot of the lectures might be two or more than 2 hours, which is much longer than I'm used to compared to a typical 45-minute high school class. And two, you're in a lecture hall sitting with a lot more students with potentially a lot less interaction. So it's more one way. I'm just curious how you ensure you stay focused and attentive and engaged during lectures, which are one, long, and two, also with so many students.
Yeah. So I want to just add on to another major difference that I saw between high school and college classes. I also noticed that college classes are a lot more dense in one lecture compared to one high school class, in the sense of, at least for high school when I went to, the entire period would be, let's say, 50 minutes long. For that, the teacher would teach for maximum of 20 to 30 minutes. And the rest of the time we'd be doing our own work, or there'd be some like group project that we work on. However, in college, the lectures, like you said, are one, they're longer, and two, the entire time the professor is just lecturing, and it's on to you to just continuously listen and to continuously take notes. So definitely one piece of advice that I have for this is, if your university does have the option of having a majority of their classes recorded, to pick and choose which classes you want to attend to in person versus online. Because while it is good to attend most of your classes in person, eventually, if you are going to be way too burnt out in person, it's not worth going to the class if you're going to not be able to focus. and just watch it later. Another benefit of watching the lectures online, if you guys do have the option of doing that, is you can pause the lecture at certain times and you can slow down the material when you do need more time to process it. And if the professor is already talking about something that you're already very familiar about, you can speed through it as well. So that way it saves you time as well. So for me, I usually just pick about I take usually 3 to 4 classes every quarter because we run on a quarter system rather than a semester system, unlike most colleges. So I usually end up taking, like I said, 3 to 4 classes. And out of that, I usually go to about 2 classes per quarter. And then I'll take 1 to 2 classes online because for us, pretty much all of our classes end up getting recorded, which is super helpful for me. And that definitely helps me to keep my attention span consistent and make sure that when I am in those couple classes that I attend in person, I can fully focus on them because I'm a lot more fresh and not burnt out from just sitting in class all the time. Another difference that I just remember right now from high school and college classes is in high school, at least for me, it's like you're in school from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. But in college, you're often in class, actually in class each day for a little bit less time, usually maybe 3 or 4 hours or so. And then you have more work that you do outside of class and more studying. So it's definitely on you to balance your time a lot better within college and figure out how you need to be prepared for that class as well, because you do need to put in a lot more work outside of that class specifically to be successful.
Yeah, I think similar macro difference which I noticed was more flexibility and less of a structure. And so you have that flexibility to manage your time how you want to. You can spend the weekends working, you can spend the weekdays chilling. So it's not as tight as school, which I think is a good thing. I think you eventually learn to be more self-responsible. I'm curious if you were to break down. So you said you've got about 4 classes per quarter. You said you attend 2 in person and 2 of them you watch online. How do you pick and choose which ones you're going to in person and which ones you're watching recorded and online?
So for me, I usually will take 1 general education class per quarter, which is just the college requirements in order to graduate in all different fields, not the major specific classes. So usually that class, I'll pick a very easy class that has a majority of students getting A in the class, usually over 80%. So those ones I'm usually fine to watch the online recorded lectures, and I'll still be fine because the class is a lot more easier and I won't have to worry about staying focused the entire time for it as well. And then usually I usually do get up a little bit later and in the day. So if I do have a super early morning class, I know that I'm not going to be focused throughout that class and I'll just be tired the entire time. So if there's that early morning class, I'll usually just take that one online as well and watch the recorded lecture after it. So whenever I do stay up a little bit more in the night and do it then. So it definitely works with your own schedule. You want to also look at the course difficulty, like I mentioned, and your own personal schedule and determine if certain classes make more sense for you to attend online and in person. If a class is usually a little bit harder, then even though if it's recorded, I'll usually still attend it in person and I'll have to watch the lecture again because to digest the material a second time, it definitely clicks a lot more once you hear that information again. So definitely determining where it works for you and just considering certain factors, like I mentioned already, like class difficulty, the class size as well, how far away of a walk it is. Because once again, if you are attending class in person, that's an extra hour, at least for us, it's an extra hour that you're wasting to go to the class and then come back to the class. Some of our classes take almost 30 minutes to walk to. So that's another important factor to consider. Is it worth it to just go for 1 50-minute lecture when you're going to be spending that amount of time going back and forth to the class? But if you have a couple classes that are back to back together, then it makes sense to make the trip down to the campus area and where our classes are. So UCLA is definitely very segregated, where we have our dorm area in one specific location and all the campuses in another area. So in fact, UCLA is actually shaped like a heart. So that's another fun fact. So when I do decide to go to the campus, it's usually for more than 1 class at a time.
And any quick note-taking tips or strategies which you picked up over the first year when you're just listening to tons of information being thrown at you, which you'd like to share even with high schoolers?
Yeah, so for me, I usually just take notes on my iPad directly. So I have the iPad tablet where you can just write down notes with the Apple Pencil. And for me, that's super useful because for a lot of my classes, especially for econ and stuff, there's so many different graphs. So what's super helpful for me is when I can copy paste from their like slideshow, when I can copy paste directly those graphs into my notes and supplement them with writing. So it's like a little bit more annotated rather than handwriting them or typing them on a Google Doc, because it makes the process a lot more efficient and neater. And then certain areas I can choose when I want to write notes in versus type notes in, because my handwriting is actually very messy. So if I'm consistently writing notes on hand, there's a good chance they're not going to be the nicest to look at, and it'll be a lot harder to digest as well. A lot of classes end up giving you one cheat sheet that you can use for the final, which is basically just a 1 page of information that you're allowed to bring with you on the final test to help you with it. So I usually will just compile all of the notes that I have and then just pick the important topics and just compile them all onto one cheat sheet. So that's just another like a good piece of advice for making your cheat sheet is like if you consistently keep up with the notes, then it makes it a lot easier for you to pick and choose from each of the individual notes that you have to compile one final note to create a cheat sheet.
Oh, this is interesting. So to ensure I've heard you correctly, the cheat sheet is not standardized for each student. It's something you get to design yourself with what you think is relevant,
Yeah.
and you bring that one picture to the exam.
Yeah, so I actually had this for a lot of my classes in high school as well. And there's been about like a few classes that I've taken here. Obviously, every class is different, but a majority of the classes that I've taken here, they allow you for the final exam to just bring like one printer size, like 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper. And then front and back, you can write whatever you want. You can type whatever you want on it, and you get to bring it with you for the test to help you. So this makes sense for a lot of classes with like a lot of formulas and a lot of other numbers that are just super hard to memorize. So that way, the whole purpose of these cheat sheets are that you can like focus on conceptually understanding the material instead of just memorizing all of these other little numbers and definitions that like don't really truly show you like the wide understanding of this class.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean that's something that's probably that's the most interesting thing I've learned in this podcast so far. I was standardized cheat sheets for all of us, but I think it's lovely that you can choose what's on your cheat sheet. Everyone's cheat sheet will be different.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Good to hear. Curious about some of the unexpected difficulties of living alone, both in terms of just living away from family, but also just adulting and being completely independent and responsible for yourself.
Definitely the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of difficulties I faced is keeping on track of your schedule and holding yourself accountable, especially in such a large university like UCLA. At the end of the day, if I wanted to sit in my dorm all day and just sleep and play video games and just eat at the dining hall, I could do that and no one would tell me a thing. But it takes a lot more within you to be able to be like, okay, I need to do this today. I need to go to this class. And after that, I'm going to go to this club meeting and I'm going to do some work for this class. And then I'll go eat at the dining hall. And having that consistency within the schedule is definitely a lot harder for me to maintain, especially at the beginning, because it's so easy once you all of a sudden just get so much freedom. It's very easy for that to get into your head, and then you like sort of lose focus of what's most important, and you definitely lose focus. There's a point of time where for a couple of weeks I definitely did feel like I would just be sitting in bed. I'd be like, okay, I can just watch this like lecture later, and then it slowly hits to you after a little bit, and then from there you're able to like create a schedule that works for you, and then getting into a routine is super helpful where you kind of expect the similar things to happen every day, and there's that level of consistency which automatically will hold you accountable as well.
Would love to hear more and dive a little deep into what does your social life look like at UCLA. So I'll keep the question broad, however you want to tackle it.
All right, yeah, so there's definitely clubs that are a big part of your social life at UCLA, and then plus just like the general friends that you hang out with and you do other activities with. So when you're starting off college, I definitely do recommend to join these clubs and these smaller communities like we were talking about before, which can help you make those friends that you can do other activities with as well. Another great way to make friends throughout college as well is also making sure that you're like in touch with people in your building and the people that live close to you, because those are the people that you're going to be surrounded with so much throughout the entire year. Like for a lot of them, like, you know, we all use the same restroom together. We all enter and exit through the same elevators. We use the same stairs. So just naturally, that's probably how I've met the most people, through my building and through all the clubs. I also do play basketball a lot, and I join like the intramural league, which is basically just you compete against other teams within UCLA. So that definitely gave me something fun to do and look forward to, because we would have practices that we host ourselves before the games, and then when we do play the games, they're often really fun, and then they're properly like organized and everything through UCLA. So they're definitely a great way to be social and then meet other people with similar interests. I also highly recommend to keep in touch with all of your other high school friends and old friends that you've had as well. And, like, they're still a big part of your life. And it's very easy once you get into day-to-day routine of college to not like sort of assume that they're part of like your social life. But like part of my social life in college is staying in touch with all the other people not in college as well. I'm still like very, very close to all my high school friends. And so far in summer, I've seen them almost every day. So I think definitely maintaining that relationship with those other people, even when you're in college, is a big part of keeping up a solid social life, because a lot of those people are going to be in your life for a long time, and just like investing into those relationships as well is something that is very easy to neglect, especially when you're surrounded by so many people.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that since I went to university, I did get disconnected from high school friends, which I didn't feel great about. That's a good tip. I still need to figure out how we can stay in consistent communication.
Yeah,
Also, once you're back home for the winter break and the summer break, I think it's good to connect back with
yeah,
people outside the UCLA ecosystem. So your high school friends and your community
yeah,
friends, extended family and relatives is also a part of social life beyond college.
yeah,
So interesting to hear. Um, your home for you is still kind of far, so about an hour's flight away. You
yeah.
have students, I'm sure, who have crossed the seven seas coming
Mhm.
from East
Oh
Asia,
yeah.
India, China to come to UCLA. And I'm sure homesickness hits almost everybody during
Mhm.
that first semester at college. Just curious if you could share one or two specific and practical tips for dealing with homesickness.
Yeah, so one thing that definitely helped me a lot was just calling my parents every day. Like my mom also told me this as well. She's like, you better call me every single day at college. So I do talk to my parents, like even if it's for like 5, 10 minutes as I'm walking to class or as I'm like walking to go somewhere else, I'll just call them on the way and ask them like what's been happening in their lives, and I just tell them like kind of what I've done in the past day. So definitely like feels nice to hear your parents' voice and like people that you really care about as well. That's like one thing that's definitely helped me a lot. The second thing that I acknowledge that this is not applied to everybody, but finding people that come from similar places as you is a great way to be reminded of your home as well and feel like that connection as well. So from my high school, there's actually like 20 something kids at UCLA. So there's like, I still run into them every now and then, and I'll say, hi, how's it going? Like have a quick conversation. And it definitely like feels good for me to like stay in touch with those people and be reminded of home, because these are the people that you've gone to school with ever since you were super young, and just seeing those familiar faces around definitely gives me that comfort as well. And like I touched on before, another great way of dealing with homesickness is just consistently calling my high school friends. Like my entire high school friend group calls almost once every week, and we just talk for a little bit, whether that's like for 30 minutes or like sometimes it goes on for hours and hours. And just putting the effort in to stay in touch with those people definitely helps me as well. The last practical tip that I have is joining like the cultural communities that are within the college as well. Like I mentioned, like pretty much all the colleges, major colleges in the US and beyond will have like Indian cultural groups or like other cultural groups related to specific interests as well. So those communities can help you like provide a sense of home, and you can find people with like very similar interests and similar backgrounds as well, because people with similar backgrounds definitely do help with homesickness because they can relate to a lot of the similar feelings that you have as well.
Beautiful. And I'm sure in terms of cultural communities, I'm sure it's also a great experience to go and experience another culture and maybe
Mm-hmm.
spend a night or go to an event of another cultural community. I know that that's been a beautiful aspect of my time at Minerva. But also, you've mentioned it twice now, and I am beginning to feel a little guilty. But I will make
Mm-hmm.
sure to set up that once a weekend call with high school
Yeah,
friends. I think that's a good practice to stay in touch with.
yeah,
You've mentioned, I think, two or three times about the general education requirements of UCLA, so the core classes you've had to take, which
yeah.
are related to your specific major. Just curious if you can share, and I love to double down on this on every episode I get, that electives are such a valuable part of college life. They are not just time pass classes. You
Yeah,
valuable skills and mindsets and worldviews, which will just help, which will either tie back to your major specifically and your career, or just in some way help you to lead, teach you a way to lead a better life, in some way or the other. So just curious if you can share one or two electives that you've taken specifically, which have been really valuable to you, and just a lot more than just those time pass classes.
yeah, yeah. All right. So one class that I took this past quarter was a class on the musical band The Beatles. So they were just like a rock band that was like a long time ago, like in the 1960s is when they started about. So this class definitely changed my perspective on how I listen to music and how I interpret music because up until this class, I would usually just listen to a song, memorize the lyrics, and then sing them aloud when I'm either alone in the shower or I'm in the car with my friends. That's usually how my relationship with music was before this class. However, this class definitely taught me the amount of work that goes into music and how to analyze the different lyrics and get like a deeper meaning from the music that I listen to. And now every time like I find a new song, I'll pull up the lyrics of that song and I'll start analyzing what it's actually trying to say instead of just like blindly memorizing the lyrics and just screaming them out loud with no idea what they mean. So even if it's like something that's this is completely like unrelated to what I'm going to be doing in the future, it's just like a little like skill or like little change that I've noticed in my life since taking that class. And it's definitely like something very interesting that helps you like grow personally, and it doesn't have to be related. Like you don't need to feel guilty about if it doesn't relate to your academic career or your life. It's just like something that you're going to be required to take, so you might as well get something out of it in the process as well.
Interesting, lovely. So even over the next 3 years, when you have to choose electives to take beyond your
Mhm.
general course requirements, will you sort of just be taking classes which seem interesting and fun, or do you think that there's another good reason or motivation to take a specific elective?
So yeah, another one reason, like you said, is just like if it's interesting and fun for you. I also sometimes look at the level of difficulty of the class itself because oftentimes a lot of the major classes are a lot more challenging than these general education requirements. So even if a class does seem super interesting to me, a part of me will also consider the class difficulty and how much work I will have to put into that class because I don't want to compromise on my major classes because that's definitely my priority and I want to make sure that I have like the time and the ability to succeed in those classes. And I don't want this to hinder my development within those classes as well. So that's definitely like one of the aspects that I will look at. We actually have a website for UCLA that shows you the grade distributions of past classes that have taken this exact same class with the same exact teacher. So I usually check that to make sure that it seems like a doable class that will not just like continue like at the end of the day like even if a class is interesting for me if I'm going to be struggling and doing so much work to try to understand it I will lose like the intrinsic motivation that I would have for that subject and I'll just only be focused on trying to like understand the material for the sole purpose of getting a good grade into the class so like I know it sounds like counterintuitive but if the class is a little bit easier it helps me to focus on like truly understanding like the material that's like in a way that's applicable to my life instead of just for the test.
And I mean, I'm sure these are good
Yeah,
figures to have in between more intense major specific classes.
yeah,
I've heard from seniors who are doing intense majors like computer science or natural sciences here at Minerva.
yeah,
Each semester, they love to take an arts and humanities or a social sciences class,
yeah,
something interesting, but also something lighter and fun.
yeah,
I think it's also valuable to also like develop a totally different skill set. So some of our majors are more
yeah,
quantitative in nature and some are more qualitative. I think it's lovely that let's say you're doing a quantitative major to also invest in some good qualitative skills and vice versa.
yeah.
Um,
I agree. Yeah,
in
and also,
sorry,
sorry,
go
cut you
ahead,
off.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that especially today's generation, it's becoming more and more important to have those soft skills, especially for people going into like quantitative careers such as like mathematics, like computer science, and to people who are going into the medical field as well, because those are some of the skills that will set you apart from that whole group of applicants that have the exact same like technical knowledge, but having that additional soft skills like your ability to talk to different people, your ability to connect with them your ability to present yourself in a confident manner, like all those little skills that you can develop from these other classes will in turn set you apart from the general pool of applicants as well.
It's interesting you bring that up. One of my friends is a hardcore computer science person,
Yeah.
a very fun elective on just stand-up comedy, and surprisingly, it taught them a lot about how to present yourself and how to do
Yeah.
public speaking, and also how to add humor to even a more serious and intense conversation or a pitch. So you never know where some skill will just come in handy
Yeah.
from a random elective you took just because you thought it was fun. So I love that we dive deep into this.
Yeah.
Another question I had, and let's be honest and candid about this for listeners, is your high school classes. So if I'm not wrong, you focused on AP, advanced
Yeah.
placement courses during your high school. Honestly, how well did they prepare you for the rigor and intensity of your UCLA classes?
I would definitely say that although AP classes are definitely more challenging than the regular classes you take in school, they're still a lot easier than taking it in college, because at the end of the day, these classes are designed for high school students and they're meant for people to complete like when they're in like 11th or 12th grade. Whereas college classes, if you take the exact equivalent out of college, it will be a lot more challenging. One of the main reasons is that is like obviously college will just go a lot more deeper into the topic. And additionally, in college, pretty much all of your grade, at least for most of the classes I take, is based on your midterm and final grade. A lot of my classes have just been 50% of your grade is your midterm, 50% of your grade is your final. So all the other projects that you do in between that you usually do in high school, like we'll have projects, we'll have assignments, we'll have homework, we'll have participation, that evens out your grade distribution. And it would end up being that even in these AP classes, a maximum of like 40 to 50% of our grade was worth all of our tests combined. So it was definitely a lot easier because you could just do well on all this easy stuff, and then you would have a lot of leeway and you wouldn't feel as pressure to do as well in the exams, knowing that you have such a high grade because of all of these other aspects of the class. However, in college, it's like both of these tests are super important, and it forces you to understand the material at a extremely deep level, because you need to make sure that you do super well on both of these tests, and like one test that you do bad on and it's like almost guaranteed that you're not going to get the best grade in that class. So definitely AP classes were a lot easier, which is why they encourage you to take it as well. Within our high school as well, they're like fully encourage you to take AP classes knowing that you will get credit for this, and it's a lot easier than doing it in college. However, I would also say that if you don't want to take AP classes as well, if you are based in the US, we have community colleges where you can do dual enrollment. And those classes are super useful because although they're a lot more easier than four-year classes, especially like universities like UCLA, UC Berkeley, all those. So these classes also will guarantee give you college credit as well. And they definitely do prepare you for the more college style classes as well, because it's at the end of the day it's through a college. So the way they structure it, the way they lecture it'll prepare you a lot more for college in terms of the overall structure of the class. But the difficulty level of these classes is about like the AP level classes as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm loving how every time I just ask for one or two suggestions, you've got about five or six. I think then listeners can pick and choose. Some things will work for person A and some things will work for person B. It's been a lovely conversation. Just want to wrap up with one last question. Overall, reflecting back on the last year at UCLA, what's been one of the most enjoyable parts of attending UCLA? And also, what's been one potential drawback or limitation you feel you've realized thus far of attending UCLA?
All right, yeah, so definitely one positive of UCLA is the dining hall food. So UCLA is actually ranked number one in the nation for dining hall food. We have food trucks that come in. We have a place that's exactly like Chipotle where you can get burritos and bowls as well. And then we have our typical dining halls as well. So the food options there, besides Indian food, have been super great there with a lot of variety every single day, which is something that I'm thankful for, especially as a vegetarian, because I hear from a lot of my other friends that are vegetarian as well, and there are other colleges, food is an immense problem for them. And it's like the same few foods every day, like pizza, salad, and a little burger, the impossible burger that everyone eats nowadays. So they're just like there are few options that they have to keep eating every day. So I'm definitely like a great part of that is that I do have a lot more variety than most college kids for in terms of my food options. That's already limited because I'm vegetarian. One of the limitations of UCLA, or something that I don't like about UCLA is how it's super duper hilly. So UCLA is completely on a hill, and how it works is to get like one my dorm is at the top of a hill, so and the campus itself is on another hill. So how it works is to get to class, you walk down a hill and then you go back up a hill to get to the classes. And on the way down, you have to like on the way back from class, you have to walk up that hill again, and it's almost like a mile total each way to get to a class sometimes. So that definitely gets tiring, and makes you really second guess if you want to take the walk to go to the campus, because knowing that like it's going to be like a 30-minute walk, plus it's going to be very uphill. And there's days when, especially when it gets a little bit hot, I come back and I'm completely drenched in sweat, and then I have to go like change my clothes, settle down for a bit, and then I can like continue on with my day. So that's definitely just one thing I don't like about UCLA is the amount of hills they have, and then eventually, especially like if you come back from the gym or something that day, and you do cardio, you have to walk back up a nice hill. It's not very fun.
Especially after leg day.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, no, I mean, tell me about hills. San Francisco has
Yeah.
given
Oh
me
yeah.
the
Those are very steep hills there too. Yeah.
I never want to walk up a hill again, is all I would say. Insane. Even we lived
Yeah.
absolutely on top of a hill. Um, but interesting. Also interesting to know that minus the Indian food, UCLA
Yeah.
has great food options, even for a vegetarian. I'm sure that's a big struggle
Yeah.
otherwise for some
Yeah.
other universities.
Hmm.
We'll wrap up with the fast fire round of questions. So this is one of my favorite parts of each episode. We'll just be asking you a couple of quick questions, sort of throwing them at you like bullets, and you can also feel free to answer in just one short phrase or one short sentence. So we'll start with your favorite late night study snack.
Double stuffed Oreos.
Okay. The
Hmm.
best piece of advice you've received from a senior or an alum of UCLA.
Keep the main thing the main thing. And basically, this piece of advice means that it's very easy to lose perspective of what matters in life. And it's so easy to get distracted and get worked up over little things that won't matter in the future, or over stress about something that won't matter too much in the future. But it's always important to keep that central goal and focus and put everything in a perspective relative to that goal to make sure that you minimize the amount of stress that you take in life and you maximize your happiness.
In the context of your life and your journey at UCLA, what do you think this means? Like, what is the main thing?
So for definitely, it feels like in college you're like surrounded by distractions. It's so easy. There's so much drama that happens within like people that you know. It's very easy when there's a game room right next to you. There's like a pool right next to you. There's like endless opportunities to do whatever you want here. But it's super important to like have that separation. For me, it really helps to have a big separation between my academic life there and my personal life there. So it doesn't get too intertwined, and it doesn't feel like my whole life revolves just around school and I get overstressed about it. So when it is my time to work on school, that's all I should be focusing on, and keep that the main thing and understand like why I'm here in the first place. And then when it is that time to relax and let go, I like put all that to the side and just have fun for a little bit, knowing that when I do come back to it, it'll be time to fully focus on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Your favorite study music or study playlist?
Definitely, I listen to a lot of R&B music with artists like Drake, so that's definitely the perfect type of music for me to listen to, especially while I'm studying.
Mine is just total silence. Not have any music studying unless it's math. Unless it's math,
Yeah.
then it's okay. Um, a new sport you want to pick up at UCLA?
I started playing pickleball a lot this year at UCLA, so that's definitely something I've been learning and trying to get better at, because it's a very popular growing sport and something that's very fun to play and very easy to pick up as well.
And lastly, just curious, what is one intention that you have to for the entire second year at UCLA? Just one sort of goal or something you want to happen over the next year?
Definitely, for me, it's forming a strong community with like the I joined the dance team, like the Ross team at UCLA. So one of my big goals this year is to do well in those competitions and like create like a strong community with those people.
Lovely. And if you had to end this wonderful episode with one piece of advice or wisdom which you'd like to share to a high schooler who's about to embark on this journey of university and then life at large
Yeah.
as well? What would one insight be?
Definitely the first piece of advice that comes to my head is don't postpone your happiness and always make sure you prioritize your happiness. I feel like it's very easy, especially when you're in school, to be like, I'll only be happy once I get an A on this test, or I'm gonna I'm gonna struggle for a bit, and it's okay if I'm not happy right now, but it's okay. I'll be happy once this test is over, and all my pressure will go away. I'll be happy like right after I finish this or I finish that. But at the end of the day, like life is going to be full of these little moments. And if you keep waiting till you reach a particular moment and say you'll be happy after that, the truth is that happiness won't last at all, because as soon as you achieve one thing, the next thing will be right up your mind. And it's like you won't be able to enjoy like the entire journey of it. So it's super important to just embrace the entire journey, find the little things that'll make you happy every single day, and like embrace it and be okay with being happy sometimes. Sometimes for a lot of people, like I used to struggle with this. I feel guilty if I'm like enjoying myself a little bit right before a big test. But at the end of the day, as long as you trust the work that you put in and you have a goal and a set plan to get where you want to be, it's okay to take those little moments and enjoy the process along the way, and not just be like, only when this happens I'll be happy, or if once I get this promotion at a job, then I'll be happy. Because at the end of the day, all this stuff is temporary, and it'll just have higher and higher goals.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, letting go of the if then model of happiness, like
Yeah,
happiness just because.
yeah,
Um, Absolutely love it. Good advice for university and for life at large as
yeah,
well. And I'm glad you realized this very early. I think this takes many people realize this at 30,
yeah,
40. It's too late. But good advice. So brilliant. I say this on every episode, but I mean, unfortunately, I have to, as the host, I have to put an end to all
yeah.
conversations, even great conversations like this one. So we will wrap up. Been a lovely conversation. Anyone who's listening who's interested in going to UCLA, I'm sure this is full of specific tips, specific advice, right from the application to actual experience at UCLA, and a lot of realities which you shared well with us. Um, and definitely makes sense to invest this summer before going to university, as you said, to maybe get a better idea of the academic rigor you're getting yourself into, because I think there is definitely a gap that needs to be bridged
Yeah.
between high school rigor and university class rigor. So beautiful. If after listening to this conversation, someone is super excited or super curious, they want to connect or they want to ask you some follow-up questions, what's a good way to reach out?
You can request to follow me on Instagram. My username is _ Kavin Shah, which is my first name, last name, and then an underscore at the end. Additionally, if you do want to email me, my email is kavinshaw635@g.ucla.edu, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Amazing. And I'll put those in the description as well. I hope you get contacted after. Thank you so much for your wise words on University Unraveled, and real pleasure to actually have you on the podcast, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. That was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.